I never thought my golden years would feel so suffocating. My name is Evelyn Harper and I've lived in this little white house on Maple Street for over 40 years. It's seen birthdays, anniversaries, and even the quiet grief of losing my husband Arthur 5 years ago. But now it feels like a stranger's home, thanks to her. Clara Bennett, my daughter-in-law, moved in with my son Ethan 6 months ago after their boutique startup went belly up. At first I welcomed them with open arms. After all, Ethan is my only child and I'd do anything for him. What I didn't expect was how quickly Clara would take over. Not just the house but my life. It started subtly enough. "Evelyn, could you please vacuum the living room?" she'd ask sweetly, as if she were doing me a favor by assigning chores. Then came the passive-aggressive comments about my cooking. "Is this really how you season chicken?" And the way she rearranged my furniture without asking. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that maybe she was stressed or homesick. But deep down I knew something was off. She wasn't just taking space, she was erasing mine. And then one day she threw away my wedding photo album, the one with pictures of Arthur and me dancing at our reception. When I confronted her, she shrugged and said, "It's just old stuff, Evelyn. You don't need clutter." That's when I realized. This woman didn't respect me. Not one bit. The breaking point came sooner than I expected. One Saturday morning, while Ethan was working late at his architecture firm, Clara decided to host a family meeting. She sat me down in the kitchen, her perfectly manicured hands resting on the table like she owned the place. "Evelyn," she began, her tone clipped, "we've been thinking it might be best if you let us handle the household finances. You're getting older and these things can be stressful." Stressful? Handling money had been second nature to me since Arthur passed. But before I could protest, Ethan chimed in, his voice hesitant but firm. "Mom, Clara's right. It'll make things easier for everyone." I felt the blood drain from my face. Easier for everyone? Was I such a burden that they needed to strip away even this small piece of independence? I wanted to scream, to tell them both exactly what I thought of their condescending plan. Instead, I nodded silently, swallowing the lump in my throat. Later that night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I realized something terrifying. Clara wasn't just trying to control the house, she was trying to control me. And unless I did something drastic, I'd lose everything that mattered. Things only got worse from there. Within weeks, Clara had turned my cozy home into her personal kingdom. She banned my weekly bridge games with the ladies from church, claiming the noise disturbed her creative process, whatever that meant. She even insisted I stop watering the garden because it wasted time. Every corner of my life felt invaded, every decision questioned. The final straw came when I found an envelope addressed to me on the dining table. Inside were documents. A loan agreement between Clara and some company I'd never heard of. When I asked Ethan about it, he avoided my gaze and muttered, "It's complicated, Mom. Just trust us." Trust them? How could I trust people who treated me like a nuisance? That's when I decided to fight back. I called my old friend Harold, a retired lawyer who'd known me since high school. Over coffee at the diner downtown, I showed him the papers. His brow furrowed as he flipped through them. "Evelyn," he said gravely, "these signatures look forged. Did you sign any of these?" I shook my head, my heart pounding. Forged signatures? This wasn't just disrespect, it was theft. Harold promised to help me gather evidence, but he warned me, this is going to get messy. Messy didn't scare me anymore. Not when my entire life was at stake. As I dug deeper, I uncovered more unsettling truths. Clara had been siphoning money from my pension account for months, funneling it into investments I knew nothing about. Worse still, she'd convinced Ethan to put the house under joint ownership without consulting me. "It's just a formality," she told him, though I overheard their conversation one evening. A formality? More like a hostile takeover. I couldn't believe Ethan had allowed this to happen. Didn't he remember growing up here? The countless nights we spent baking cookies together in the kitchen? Or had Claire erased those memories too? One night, unable to sleep, I crept into Ethan's study and opened his laptop. His password was laughably easy, Clara's birthday. What I found made my stomach churn. Text messages between Clara and someone named Marcus. They weren't business-related. No, they were intimate, flirty exchanges filled with promises of secret meetings. My hands trembled as I took screenshots. So, Clara wasn't just stealing from me, she was cheating on my son. I should have felt vindicated, triumphant even. Instead I felt hollow. How could someone betray us so completely? For days I debated whether to confront Clara with what I'd discovered. Part of me wanted to march into the living room, throw the printouts onto the coffee table and demand answers. But another part, the smarter part, knew better. If I acted rashly, Clara would twist the situation to paint me as the villain. No, I needed proof beyond doubt. Proof that would leave no room for manipulation or excuses. Harold suggested installing a nanny cam in the hallway outside my bedroom. Reluctantly I agreed. The device was small, unobtrusive, and recorded audio as well as video. Within a week, it captured Clara arguing with Ethan about selling the house behind my back. Watching the footage later, I felt a strange mix of anger and sadness. Anger at Clara for her audacity, yes, but also sadness for Ethan. He looked so defeated, so lost. When had my bright, ambitious boy become this shadow of himself? The realization hit me hard. Clara wasn't just destroying me, she was breaking Ethan too. And yet, despite everything, I still loved him. Maybe that's why I hesitated to show him the recordings. Maybe that's why I kept holding on to hope, even as it slipped further away. By Christmas Eve, tensions had reached a boiling point. Clara announced during dinner that she'd found a buyer for the house. A developer interested in tearing it down to build condos. "It's progress, Evelyn," she said with a smug smile, as if bulldozing my memories was some kind of achievement. Ethan barely touched his food, his eyes glued to the tablecloth. I stared at them both, my chest tight with rage and despair. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading. The moment I had to choose between silence and survival. After dessert, I excused myself to fetch something from my bedroom. When I returned, I placed a thick envelope on the table between us. "What's this?" Clara asked, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Your eviction papers," I replied, my tone icy. Her jaw dropped. Ethan blinked at me, stunned. "You can't be serious," Clara spat. "Oh, but I was dead serious." The room went silent after I handed over the eviction papers. Clara's face turned red, her lips curling into a sneer that made my skin crawl. "You think you can just throw us out?" she hissed, slamming her hands on the table. Ethan sat frozen, his fork still dangling from his fingers like he'd forgotten how to move. For once, Clara wasn't in control, and it terrified her. I didn't flinch. "This is my house," I said firmly, meeting her glare head-on. "And I've had enough of your manipulation and lies." Her nostrils flared, and for a moment I thought she might lunge at me. Instead she turned to Ethan, her tone shifting to something softer, sweeter, calculated. "Ethan, tell your mother this is ridiculous. We're family." Family? The word tasted bitter coming from her mouth. But Ethan hesitated, his eyes darting between us like he was caught in some invisible tug-of-war. Finally he muttered, "Mom, maybe we should talk about this." Talk? After everything she'd done? I felt a surge of disappointment so sharp it nearly knocked the breath out of me. Clara seized the opportunity, wrapping an arm around Ethan's shoulders as if claiming victory. "See? Even Ethan agrees this is unfair." Unfair? My mind reeled. She'd forged my signature, stolen my money, and treated me like dirt, and now I was the unreasonable one? I clenched my fists under the table, forcing myself to stay calm. "There's nothing to discuss," I said coldly. "You have 30 days to leave. That's final." With that, I stood up and walked away, leaving them both sitting there in stunned silence. It wasn't easy walking out of that room, but it was necessary. Sometimes standing your ground means letting go of what you love most, even if it hurts. In the days that followed, Clara declared war. She stopped speaking to me entirely, treating me like a ghost haunting her precious plans. Every time I entered a room, she'd either storm out or ignore me completely. Ethan tried to mediate, pleading with me to reconsider. "She's sorry, Mom," he insisted one evening, his voice tinged with desperation. Sorry? If she was truly sorry, she would have apologized instead of doubling down on her entitled behavior. But no, she continued ordering me around, acting as though nothing had changed. It was maddening. Worse still, Clara began spreading rumors among our neighbors, painting me as the villain in this twisted drama. Poor Clara, I overheard Mrs. Peterson say to another neighbor outside the grocery store. "Can you believe Evelyn kicked her own son and daughter-in-law out right before Christmas?" My heart sank. I wanted to defend myself, to explain the truth, but I knew it wouldn't matter. People always believed the prettier story, the simpler narrative. Clara was young, polished, and charming, I was old, tired, and stubborn. Who would take my side? To make matters worse, Ethan distanced himself from me too. He stopped visiting my room and avoided eye contact during meals. It felt like I'd lost him all over again, but this time it was by choice. I spent hours alone in my bedroom staring at the walls, wondering if I'd made the right decision. Was holding on to my dignity worth losing my son? Yet every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself why I'd started this fight in the first place. This wasn't just about me, it was about reclaiming my life. As the deadline approached, I knew I needed more than just words to protect myself. Clara was cunning, and I had no doubt she'd try to overturn the eviction somehow. So, I decided to gather irrefutable proof of her deceit. Late one night, while Clara and Ethan were asleep, I snuck into Ethan's study again. His laptop was password protected, but I'd memorized the pattern of keys he pressed when logging in. Once inside, I sifted through files until I found what I was looking for. Bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals from my pension account, emails detailing Clara's secret meetings with Marcus, and even drafts of fake legal documents she'd planned to use against me. I copied everything onto a USB drive and took it straight to Harold. He reviewed the evidence with wide eyes, shaking his head in disbelief. "Evelyn, this is explosive," he said gravely. "If Clara tries to contest the eviction, this will destroy her case." "Destroy her case?" "Good. That's exactly what I wanted." Still, part of me hesitated. Was I being too harsh? Too vengeful? Then I remembered the way Clara had dismissed my memories, my independence, my very existence. No, I wasn't being harsh, I was being fair. Justice demanded consequences, and I intended to deliver them. On the last day of their 30-day notice, Clara stormed into the living room, her face flushed with fury. "You can't do this," she screamed, waving the eviction papers in my face. "We'll sue you for everything you're worth." I crossed my arms, refusing to back down. "Go ahead," I replied evenly. "But I suggest you read the fine print first." With that, I handed her a folder containing the evidence I'd collected, the bank statements, the emails, the recordings. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages, her confidence crumbling with each passing second. Ethan arrived moments later, drawn by the commotion. When he saw the folder in Clara's hands, his expression shifted from confusion to horror. "What is this?" he demanded, looking at me. Before I could answer, Clara exploded. "It's nothing. Lies. She's making it all up." But Ethan didn't believe her, not this time. He grabbed the folder and scanned its contents, his face growing paler with every line. "Is this true?" he asked Clara, his voice barely above a whisper. She stammered, unable to deny the undeniable. In that moment, I saw the truth dawn on Ethan's face. He realized he'd been betrayed, not just by Clara but by his own blindness. And for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. The house was eerily quiet after Clara and Ethan left that day. Their suitcases thudded down the stairs, wheels screeching against the hardwood floors as they dragged them out to their car. Clara didn't say a word, just glared at me with venom in her eyes before slamming the door behind her. Ethan lingered for a moment, his hand resting on the doorknob. "Mom," he began, his voice heavy with regret. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. Not yet. Watching him walk away felt like reopening a wound I thought had healed years ago. Once they were gone, I wandered through the empty rooms, taking stock of the damage they'd left behind. Clothes strewn across the floor, drawers left open, and half-empty bottles of wine scattered on the countertops. It was as if a storm had passed through. But beneath the mess there was something else. Freedom. For the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling suffocated. I opened the windows, letting fresh air sweep away the lingering tension. Then I poured myself a cup of tea and sat in my favorite armchair, staring out at the garden. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was mine again. And for now that was enough. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into reclaiming my life. First, I redecorated the house, stripping away every trace of Clara's influence. Out went the minimalist furniture she'd insisted on buying. In came cozy pieces that reminded me of Arthur and happier times. I repainted the walls a soft lavender, a color Clara had once dismissed as too old-fashioned. Next, I reconnected with my friends from the book club who welcomed me back with open arms. They listened patiently as I recounted everything that had happened, offering support without judgment. But the biggest change was within me. Without Clara's constant criticism weighing me down, I rediscovered parts of myself I'd forgotten existed. I started volunteering at the local library, helping organize events for children. I even signed up for a painting class, an activity I'd always been too intimidated to try. Slowly but surely I began to feel alive again. One afternoon, while working on a watercolor landscape of the garden, I realized something profound. Revenge hadn't brought me happiness. It was reclaiming my independence that did. Still, I couldn't shake the ache of losing Ethan. No matter how much I tried to fill the void, his absence loomed large. Just when I thought I'd moved past the pain, a letter arrived in the mail. The envelope bore no return address, but I recognized Ethan's handwriting immediately. My hands trembled as I opened it, bracing myself for whatever lay inside. To my surprise, it wasn't an accusation or a plea. It was an apology. "Dear Mom," he wrote, "I don't know where to start except to say I'm sorry. Sorry for not seeing what Claire was doing to you. Sorry for letting her come between us. She left me last week, taking most of our savings with her. I don't know how to fix things, but I want to try. Please forgive me." Tears blurred my vision as I read his words. Part of me wanted to forgive him instantly, to tell him everything would be okay. But another part, the wiser part, knew better. Forgiveness wasn't something you gave lightly, especially when trust had been shattered. Instead, I tucked the letter into a drawer and resolved to think about it later. For now, I needed space, not just from Claire but from Ethan too. With my newfound freedom, I decided to fulfill a lifelong dream: traveling to Europe. Arthur and I had always talked about visiting Paris and Rome, but life kept getting in the way. Now, with nothing holding me back, I booked a month-long trip. The experience was transformative. In Paris, I strolled along the Seine, marveling at the Eiffel Tower lit up against the night sky. In Florence, I stood awestruck before Michelangelo's David, feeling small yet profoundly connected to humanity's shared history. Everywhere I went, I took photographs, not just of landmarks but of fleeting moments. A street musician playing accordion, a couple sharing gelato, sunlight streaming through ancient stone arches. Each snapshot felt like a reminder that life was meant to be lived fully, not wasted on bitterness or regret. Yet even amid the beauty, thoughts of home lingered. I wondered how Ethan was coping without Clara. Was he struggling to rebuild his life? Did he miss me as much as I missed him? These questions haunted me during quiet moments, tugging at my heartstrings. On my final night in Venice, as I watched the sun set over the Grand Canal, I made a silent promise to myself. When I returned home, I'd face whatever awaited me with courage and grace. I should have known Clara wouldn't stay gone for long. Less than a week after I returned from Europe, she showed up at my doorstep unannounced, her designer handbag slung over one shoulder and a smug smile plastered across her face. "Evelyn," she said sweetly, as if we were old friends reunited after years apart. "Can we talk?" After everything she'd done? I almost laughed in her face. But then I noticed the slight tremor in her voice, the faint bruise peeking out from beneath her sleeve. Something was off. Reluctantly, I let her inside. Over coffee, she spun a sob story about how Ethan had abandoned her, leaving her broke and alone. "I realize now how wrong I was," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "I treated you horribly and I'm so sorry." Her words sounded rehearsed, calculated, but convincing nonetheless. When she placed a hand on mine, feigning sincerity, I felt a flicker of doubt. Was it possible she'd changed? Or was this just another act, another scheme to manipulate me? Before I could decide, she dropped the bombshell. "Ethan doesn't know I'm here. He thinks I left town for good. But I need your help, Evelyn. Please." Against my better judgment, I agreed to hear her out. Clara explained that she'd faked a pregnancy to win Ethan back, only to discover she was genuinely expecting a child conceived during one of her secret rendezvous with Marcus. "It's his baby," she confessed, her voice trembling. "Not Ethan's." The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. All this time she'd been playing both men, weaving lies to keep them under her thumb. And now, faced with the consequences of her actions, she expected me to bail her out? I stared at her, incredulous. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked finally. "Because I have nowhere else to turn," she replied, her composure cracking. "If Ethan finds out, he'll never forgive me. Neither will Marcus. You're the only person who can protect me." Protect her? After everything she'd done to me? The audacity of her request left me speechless. Yet deep down I knew what I had to do. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. And justice demanded the truth come to light. I didn't confront Clara immediately after her confession. Instead, I spent the night wrestling with my thoughts, pacing back and forth in my bedroom like a caged animal. Her words echoed in my mind, "You're the only person who can protect me." The audacity of it, the sheer gall, made my blood boil. But beneath the anger was a quieter, more unsettling emotion: pity. For all her cunning and manipulation, Clara was trapped in a web of her own making. And now she was begging for mercy from the one person she'd wronged the most. The next morning I called Ethan. His voice sounded weary when he answered, but there was a flicker of hope in his tone. "Mom," he said cautiously. "Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath before speaking. "We need to talk," I told him. "It's about Clara." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "What about her?" he asked, his voice tightening. "She's here," I replied simply. "And she has something to tell you." I could hear the hesitation in his breathing, the weight of unspoken fears pressing down on him. "I'll be there in an hour," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. When Ethan arrived, the tension in the room was palpable. Clara sat stiffly on the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Ethan stood by the door, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "What's going on, Mom?" he asked, glancing between us. I nodded toward Clara. "Tell him," I said firmly. She flinched, her eyes darting nervously around the room. For a moment I thought she might try to lie her way out of it. But then the dam broke. "I'm pregnant," she blurted out, her voice shaking. Ethan's face went pale. "What?" he whispered, his voice hollow. "It's not yours," she admitted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's Marcus's." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan staggered backward as if he'd been physically struck. "How could you?" he choked out, his voice cracking. Clara reached for him, but he recoiled, disgust etched across his features. "Don't touch me," he snapped. "I trusted you. I loved you. And this whole time you've been lying to me." Watching the scene unfold was both painful and cathartic. Painful because I hated seeing my son hurt, and cathartic because justice had finally been served. Clara's lies had unraveled, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. Yet even as I watched her crumble, I couldn't muster any sympathy. Some wounds cut too deep to heal. After the initial shock wore off, Ethan turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and gratitude. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he demanded, his voice tinged with accusation. I met his gaze steadily. "Because it wasn't my truth to share," I replied. "But now you know everything. What happens next is up to you." He nodded slowly, his jaw clenched. Turning back to Clara, he spoke with quiet resolve. "Get out," he said. "Now." Clara opened her mouth to protest, but Ethan cut her off. "This is over. We're done." As Clara gathered her things and left, Ethan sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. I hesitated, unsure whether to comfort him or give him space. Finally, I sat beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry," I murmured. He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and swollen. "No, Mom," he said softly. "I'm the one who should be sorry. I let her come between us. I ignored everything you tried to tell me." His words caught me off guard. For so long I dreamed of hearing him say those exact things, but now that they were here I felt only sadness. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and I began to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't easy. Years of resentment and betrayal don't vanish overnight. But we took small steps forward. He started visiting regularly, bringing groceries and helping me tackle household projects. We talked about everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Slowly, the walls between us began to crumble. Still, forgiveness didn't come naturally. Every time Ethan apologized, part of me wanted to accept it without question. But another part, the part that remembered how he'd abandoned me, held back. One evening, as we sat together on the porch watching the sunset, I voiced my doubts. "I want to forgive you, Ethan," I said quietly. "But trust takes time to rebuild. You have to earn it." He nodded, his expression somber. "I understand, Mom. And I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." His sincerity touched me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that some scars never fully heal. Christmas came and went, marking the first holiday season without Clara or the illusion of a perfect family. Ethan joined me for dinner, filling the void left by his absence the previous year. We laughed, shared stories, and reminisced about happier times. Yet despite the warmth of the evening, there was an undeniable emptiness, a chair that would forever remain vacant. As we cleared the table afterward, Ethan paused, staring at the empty seat where Clara used to sit. "Do you think I'll ever find someone who truly loves me?" he asked suddenly, his voice tinged with vulnerability. I set down the dishes and placed a hand on his arm. "You will," I assured him. "But first you need to learn to love yourself. Trust your instincts. Don't settle for less than you deserve." He smiled faintly, though his eyes still carried a shadow of doubt. In that moment I realized something profound. Forgiveness isn't just about letting go of anger. It's about finding peace within yourself. And sometimes that journey is longer than we expect. Months passed and life settled into a fragile rhythm. Ethan visited regularly and our bond grew stronger with each passing week. Yet there was always an unspoken tension lingering beneath the surface, a reminder of the wounds that still hadn't fully healed. One rainy afternoon, as I sat knitting by the window, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. The name flashing across the screen made my heart sink. Clara Bennett. I stared at it for a long moment, debating whether to answer. What could she possibly want now? Finally, curiosity got the better hand and I pressed accept. Her voice came through shaky and desperate. "Evelyn, please listen," she begged. "I'm in trouble. Marcus left me and I have no one else to turn to." My grip tightened on the phone. "What do you expect me to do?" I asked coldly. "You lied to my son, stole from me, and treated me like dirt. Why should I help you now?" There was a pause followed by a choked sob. "Because nobody deserves to be alone," she whispered. Her words struck a chord deep within me, but not enough to sway my resolve. "You made your choices, Clara," I said firmly. "Now you have to live with them." With that, I ended the call and set the phone aside. As much as I pitied her predicament, I knew helping her would only reopen old wounds, for me and for Ethan. Some people can't be saved no matter how hard you try. A few weeks later, Ethan showed up at my door unexpectedly, his face pale and drawn. "Mom, I need to ask you something," he said, his voice trembling. He hesitated as if searching for the right words. "Claire called me last night. She's in the hospital. The baby's coming early and she doesn't have anyone else." His confession hit me like a freight train. Despite everything, Clara was still tied to us. Through blood, through circumstance, through the tangled mess of human relationships. "What do you want me to do?" I asked gently, though I already knew the answer. Ethan looked at me, his eyes pleading. "I don't know if I can forgive her completely," he admitted. "But I can't ignore the fact that she's carrying my child. Or at least someone who will share my DNA. If I don't go, I'll regret it forever." I nodded slowly, understanding the weight of his decision. "Then you should go," I told him. "But remember this, Ethan. Showing compassion doesn't mean excusing her actions. You owe her nothing, not forgiveness, not support. Do what feels right for you." He hugged me tightly before leaving and I watched him drive away, wondering if this act of mercy would heal him, or break him further. The days turned into weeks and Ethan didn't return. When he finally did, he was quieter than usual, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Over tea, he told me about the birth of Clara's daughter, a tiny girl named Sophia. "She looks so innocent," he murmured almost to himself. "It's hard to believe she's part of all this chaos." I reached across the table and took his hand. "Children are born without sin," I reminded him softly. "They inherit none of their parents' mistakes unless we teach them otherwise." As the months went by, Ethan began building a new life for himself. He filed for legal guardianship of Sophia, ensuring she'd grow up surrounded by love and stability, even if her mother couldn't provide it. Clara faded into the background, a ghost of our past. Occasionally, I'd wonder where she was or how she was coping, but I never sought answers. Some stories are better left unfinished. One crisp autumn morning, I stood in the garden, watching the leaves fall like golden rain. The house felt different now, lighter, freer. It wasn't perfect. Scars remained etched into its walls, just as they were etched into mine. But it was home. And sometimes that's all we really need. As I gazed out at the horizon, I thought about the lessons I'd learned, the cost of betrayal, the power of forgiveness, and the resilience of the human spirit. Life is messy, unpredictable, and often painful. But even in its darkest moments, There's beauty to be found, if you're brave enough to look for it. And so, I let go of the anger, the hurt, the longing for justice. Because holding on to those things only weighs you down. Instead, I chose peace. For myself, for Ethan, and for little Sophia, whose laughter echoed through the halls. A reminder that hope endures even when everything else falls apart.